As I'm sure might be the case for most of you out there, I can't get enough of the Praxic Blade. It's been such a fun weapon to experiment with, and it's easily one of the most powerful options we have right now. With its fantastic customizability through its grips, forms, and catalysts, it feels like there's dozens of Praxic builds ahead of me, but this one might just be the most fitting of them all. Fantasy plays a pretty big role in Destiny for a lot of players, and while I don't normally strive for thematic builds, Arc Warlock with Praxic Blade feels so perfectly Sith. Stormtrance has always been really cool to me because it was like Force Lightning, but paired with summons and Praxic Blade, you become an almost untouchable force of arc energy, and it perfectly fulfills that fantasy of the dark side. Stormtrance has also gone from one of the most underperforming supers to one of the most overperforming ones thanks to a buff to Stormdancer's Brace that came with Renegades. Stormdancer deals an astonishing amount of total damage, even just to a single target, and it lasts for ages, making it really easy to build up the damage when you're clearing crowds. In activities that are ad dense like Frontiers, you can dust an entire wave with just one super, and you'll immediately be a third of the way back to the next one once it ends. The rate at which Arc Warlocks can generate supers is also pretty ridiculous. With your summons out, throwing Praxic through crowds, and dropping non-stop bolt charges, you can get supers back in seconds. Combine that with high orb generation to maintain your fonts, ionic traces to crank ability generation, and the right armor sets to maximize your survivability, this build excels in every category. It's also extremely fun to use. I've been really drawn to Arc lately as the summons have been ramped up pretty drastically now that they're considered grenades, and they've opened up so many interesting and powerful avenues for build crafting as a Warlock. This is another one of those builds that to me exemplifies just how great Arc feels right now and how cool some of the recent sandbox changes have been. So with all that in mind, let's go over some of the specifics so you can see exactly what I was working with. If you're unfamiliar, the way Stormdancers works is when you're using Stormtrance, dealing damage or killing enemies grants you stacks of ascending amplitude, which increases your damage with each stack. Stormdancers also refunds up to 30% of your super energy once it ends, depending on how many enemies you defeat, as well as granting you bolt charge on ability damage when you're amplified. Now, all of these benefits are excellent for different reasons, but the standout is the super damage. As you can see in this clip, the first tick of my super deals 78 damage and ramps up with each tick and each stack of ascending amplitude. At the maximum stacks of 30, Stormtrance was dealing 376 damage per tick, which comes in at a whopping 382% increase to damage. Depending on how many enemies you can kill at the start of the super and how early you can get to those max stacks, this can massively increase Stormtrance's output and overall damage. Paired alongside the energy refund and Arc's insane super generation, you can have these incredibly hard-hitting supers almost back to back. As you can see in this clip, even though I get less than the full 30% refund to start, I generate my entire super back in about 18 seconds. A huge contributor to this is the summons, which can not only take advantage of firepower to make orbs and ashes to assets for extra super energy, but just dealing damage, they generate a bunch of super energy. Since they can take advantage of Spark of Shock to jolt targets on hit, as you can see in this clip, just having a sentry hit a target and jolt a few nearby ones generates a pretty substantial amount of energy on its own. When you got both your summons up, jolting targets, and you're slaying out in the meantime, supers come back in the blink of an eye. As I mentioned, Stormdancers also gives you extra bolt charge generation from ability damage while you're amplified. This is great alongside Ionic Sentry, as it itself is an ability that generates bolt charge when it deals damage, and it can net you loads of arc multi-kills to keep you amplified. As a result, bolt charge generates at a blistering pace, dealing loads of damage, and with the artifact mod Dielectric, can heal you in the process and generate extra orbs. With how fast bolt charge goes off with this build, Dielectric offers fantastic healing and gives you a much needed survivability option on top of your healing rift. So with all that in mind, for this build, I wanted to generate as much bolt charge as possible so I could take advantage of Dielectric and generate supers as fast as I could. I went with Ionic Sentry as my first aspect, not only to help clear crowds, but also to generate bolt charge. It charges up with both kinetic and arc damage, meaning it will pair perfectly with Praxic as well. I also went with Arc Soul to cause more ability damage to gain extra bolt charge stacks, and paired with Spark of Shock as my first fragment, both summons can jolt targets on hit. That all pairs perfectly with Spark of Ions to generate an Ionic Trace when defeating a jolted target, and Spark of Discharge to gain extra stacks of bolt charge whenever I collect a trace. Finally, I went with Spark of Resistance just to help keep me healthy when I was in the thick of things. For my armor set, I went with Sword Masters as I was using defensive form with Praxic, as well as Refraction Core, which grants stacks of Bolt Charge when dealing reflection damage. While my summons were up jolting enemies, I could reflect shots to keep myself safe, generate extra Bolt Charge and charge up Ionic Sentry, and when I put down my guard to throw the next sentry out or attack, I'd get that damage resistance. For armor mods, Firepower and Ashes to Assets are must-haves to get those supers back, and I went with a lot of fonts as well, since most of the stats are pretty important for this build. I'd say that Super and Grenade are your two primary stats, and it depends on if you want to prioritize your summon damage or your Storm Trance damage. I personally wanted a balance between the two, so with my fonts, I landed them both at around the 150 mark, which also let me keep my weapon stat over 100 for Praxic. I'd also say class is a pretty important stat, so you can consistently summon your Arc Soul, and so you have a backup option to heal you if Dielectric isn't doing the trick. With that in mind, with two class stats, I got myself up to 100 so I could max out its regen. For the artifact mods, as I mentioned, Dielectric is a fantastic choice for this build, as just about every enemy you defeat will be debuffed, netting you that healing and getting you those extra orbs. Elemental Siphon's also a great pick to help generate extra Ionic Traces, as well as Armor Smith for some extra damage resistance. Finally, Argent Blade and Swordstorm combo are both must-haves, as they drastically increase Praxic's already crazy damage. While I feel like I've only scratched the surface with Praxic, I think this build is exactly what I'm looking for when I'm using it. With the versatility of summons and how much damage and debuffs they can put out autonomously, it means I can take full advantage of what Arc offers no matter what I'm doing with Praxic. Whether I'm throwing it into crowds or reflecting shots or just slaying out, everything Arc Warlock has to work with complements Praxic perfectly and does so to pretty incredible effect. Overall, this build is extremely fun to use, covers a lot of bases, and clears out a room like nothing else. Stormdancer's Brace feels fantastic right now, and I think it's a perfect complement to Arc Warlock and Praxic specifically. Paired with Dielectric, Bolt Charge, Refraction Core, and Summons, it's a non-stop fest of Bolt Charge, Jolt, and supers. It's been an absolute blast to play around with this build, trying different stat distributions or armor sets, and it will absolutely be one that I come back to a lot when I'm using Praxic. I highly recommend it, and if you give it a shot, I hope you have as much fun with it as I have. Thank you so much for watching, hope you enjoyed the video. There's a dim link down below if you want to give this exact build a try, or if you want to use it as the base for your own spin on it. Subscribe to the channel to keep an eye out for more videos soon, and let me know in the comments what you think of Praxic Blade and Stormdancer's Brace.